There we are. Hello. Hello, friends. Welcome. Welcome to this live stream, this little chat about anger. Like all things in life, when there comes a time when we're inspired to do a live stream on anger, it is incredible how, like, this week I activated something that was like, okay, so all of these different past examples of my anger have been coming to me so that I can, like, look at it and see, like, what did the anger do? What was it telling me, right? Like, emotions are messages, I believe, and they're guiding us. So, like, our anger, like all emotions, are helping. Every time we get angry, being able to feel that and do what anger wants us to do, which is to take action and make something right that's not currently right. Um, just like fear alerts us to danger, and it's like that automatic response in the brain, that ancient part of the brain, the amygdala, where fear comes from, where it activates our fight or flight response. Anger works very similarly in the brain, and it alerts us to injustice. So just like fear alerts us to danger, anger alerts us to injustice. Another way to think about it was in terms of appetites or motivators. Like, when you witness injustice, anger serves as a motivator to fix it, to make it right, to make it balanced, to bring justice to the situation, to stand up and declare, I don't think that this is right. I think there needs to be a tweak in here somewhere. You mount a complaint. It's a motivation to mount a complaint about what you're witnessing. And just like calling it a motivator, just like thirst, our thirst is a motivator to drink some water. So, like, that's our body talking to us through our sensations. And hunger, same thing. It's trying to motivate us to eat some food. So if we feel mad, if we feel angry, then that's our body's way, our whole self, their way of trying to communicate with us that something is not right here, that we've had enough, that we're crossing our own boundary, and nothing good is coming after that. So, yeah, it's like expressing anger is, I would say, like, expressing all emotion and knowing what to do with emotion is kind of an art form that takes takes oh boy, what does it take? Lots of things, I would say, like a patience with yourself, a patience with, like, being with things that don't always feel really good while they're happening, and anger is one of those. And to somebody who's outside of the injustice, like, they're not witnessing the injustice, only you are, your anger might look really inappropriate to them, and that's essentially what happens to us, a lot of us, when we're kids. And that, like, anger, when we think about what is the main problem with anger in the world today, the biggest problem, and this comes from the live stream prep playlist for this week, there's lots of different perspectives on there about anger and, like, what is it and why do we have it? Why is it an evolutionary advantage to get mad? Um, and why do we suppress it? The biggest problem with anger in the world is that most of us aren't listening to what is pissing us off. And we just continue, because when we're little, so many parents train their children to be good, to, like, be polite, to be gentle, to be modest, to not allowed to complain, not allowed to mount a complaint about whatever was happening. I know that was very much the way I was trained, when I was a child, was that I had nothing to be mad about, basically. And so to just shut that shit down and don't express it, don't mount your complaints. Like that was generally my conditioning when I got here. And so I can definitely see where that leads to suppressing it. And then as we are trying to suppress it, we just stop even listening to those responses of like, we're mad and we're not letting ourselves get mad. And so that's one piece with anger is like, are you allowed to let that out? Are you allowed to complain or make a fuss, as one video called it? Like, most of us weren't allowed to make a fuss when we were little. I know I wasn't. It was, like, highly frowned upon, my emotional outbursts of any kind, especially anger. Like, you gotta be nice, like, especially I was the oldest one, and so anytime I would, like, be mean or whatever towards my siblings, because in my mind, I felt like there was an injustice happening, and so I'm, like, in my little, like, five-year-old brain trying to right the injustice, and then my mom comes down on me like, "That's inappropriate, like, you're being inappropriate, you shouldn't treat them like that, like, they don't know any better," implying that I did, and that, like, you're wrong to feel that way, and so I think a lot of us very likely went through some form of having our expressions, which is to say our emotions, silenced and told that it's not the right time, it's not the right place to say those things. And then as it turned out, there really was no right place, there was no right time. Like, just keep it in, keep it on the inside. And I know for me, expressing anger does not come naturally. I would much rather just avoid the situation altogether and keep it to myself and work through it in myself versus express it to the other person because historically that doesn't go well for me. And at the same time, I do see what there was a TED talk by, I think his name was Randy Martin, maybe? Sounds like a country singer. Ryan Martin, yeah, that's less of a country singer. So yeah, Ryan Martin's TED Talk about anger and like how it's helpful to us, why it does serve this evolutionary advantage. Like it gives us a leg up. It gives us the energy that we need to fight injustice. And so it is really worth thinking about the things that make us mad and the things that feel unjust about what's happening either to you personally or in the world. And like back in the day, our ancestors, long, long time ago, they were more likely to pick up a club and just beat somebody when they felt there was an injustice. It just was a physical fight, and the winner was the stronger one physically. And like, we don't live in that time anymore. So, anger isn't necessarily trying to provoke a physical response, even though that's exactly what happens in our body as far as like the sensation of when we witness injustice. And I'm going to break that down because that's actually a really interesting concept of even just what does that mean, witnessing injustice. There's so much that goes on inside that experience, but once we've called it injustice, we say that's wrong, this is detrimental, this is harmful. When we've reached that conclusion, it unleashes a whole plethora of hormones, chemicals into our body so that we will stand up and fix it. We're not meant to just let it be wrong and let it be like cruel to vulnerable populations or let it be taking advantage of vulnerable populations so that, people who already have plenty can have more. Like when we see these imbalances in the world, like we're not meant to just sit there and let it happen. So that's where what makes you mad? What makes you mad? And there's probably a whole range if your experience is anything like mine from this last week. Like there's a whole range of things that make us mad, from the very small and maybe inconsequential, but you're still mad, to the very large things that are not inconsequential at all. But honestly, it all feels the same. Like anger feels like anger. Like in your body, it feels like what it feels like to me is like being ripped apart. It's an incredibly uncomfortable sensation in my center, like, where there is something wrong. This is wrong. Something is wrong. Like, it feels like your chest is coming apart, and so the motivation to do something, to close the gap, to make it right, to make it stop. Like there is an urgency in anger that is meant to be there. Because when a vulnerable population can't protect itself, who does that? We do. By getting mad and stepping up and being like, I'll be the one to be your advocate. I'll use my voice and fight for your rights. Like there's such a Aries Libra kind of axis in anger, as far as anger is a very Aryan emotion. It takes us immediately to the core of who we are and what we stand for and what we will and will not tolerate in this world, what we're willing to go to war over. Like there are certain things that, yeah, like when it comes to the vulnerable who cannot protect themselves, and then the greed of the wealthy ones, like there's something inside of that that is one of the primary sources of my anger about just the way that the world is structured historically. And I can see how my anger at that, it does cause me to, my anger and a lot of other factors cause me to want to show up in the world in a different way. Want me to like in my very passive approach, actually, I just had a reading this week by Galactic Mystic, the YouTube channel. She goes by Ananda, and the reading was amazing. So I would highly recommend if you even just want to go look at her channel, incredible energy. But she really helped me to see that like my approach isn't so much passive as it is energy efficient. So it's like in my way, I pull my energy out of what doesn't work. So like the structures that I deem unjust, or like the software company that I worked at back in the day and the way they treated their employees, I just like couldn't watch it. I couldn't be a part of it. I can't make my money off this system. It felt gross to me. And as far as fighting the system and making a change, this is not my company. This is somebody else's party. This is their pool and they can pee in it if they want to. What I can do is to withdraw my energy, and then I can put it into the system that I do want to vote for. I do want to perpetuate this system with my life force energy. And so rather than fighting the old, I don't have the energy to fight anything. All I can do is point myself in a productive direction. And that's the hope of anger, especially as you do try to channel your emotions into something productive, as far as really taking advantage of the message that it is. Because I really do believe in not treating people like a number. I want to see the individual soul standing in front of me, not, we have 83 associates and we have, 74 senior associates and we have 25 account reps and we have 7 vice president. Like these are just faceless, nameless people, like jigs in a puzzle, like just putting the pieces together, like no personal connection with the soul that every single one of them are. No personal connection to like where were they coming from when they got here, and where are they going when they're leaving here, and why are they here at this time with us? Like a personal connection to every single divine being that you bring into your sphere of business, your sphere of doing something in the world. Like that's how I believe it's productive to employ people and treat them in a team environment. Those are my beliefs based on what I've lived. And rather than, like trying to like stage a boycott back at the software company or whatever, I very much just withdrew my energy. I'm like, I don't want to work here anymore. And that's what that was. And I let it go in the direction that felt more aligned with what felt true to me. And honestly, I think that's the best that we can ever do when we get mad, is to not even necessarily think that I'm angry at the system, so I have to change the system. Maybe the answer is to not participate, to like unhook your energy from the thing that you cannot control and to refocus your energy into the thing that you can control. Like, that's one of the biggest sources of anger is feeling out of control, feeling like somebody else is taking control of your experience and you no longer have control. And there's like a powerlessness in it and a desire to hold your own power. And that anger, it turns the temperature up, it turns the energy up, it turns the bravery up, the ability to face the scary thing and be like, "I'll take my power and I'll hold it because, yeah, I can make my own decisions. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I can decide where I want to put my energy in terms of what I think is right and what I think is just in this world." So there is such a partnership between that Aries core of who we are and what we came here to be, and the Libra end of creating harmony and creating balance and fairness and justice for all, right? Like, I think, yeah, there's like a like, as far as I picture, like, the movie Inside Out, where it shows you, like, the control panel, so to speak, of, like, all your different emotions and how anger, like when you see something that isn't what you want or what you think you need, like when your needs aren't getting met, that's another like major source of anger. We can feel angry because we think we need the thing that we aren't getting, and then we get mad and we act out because the anger is there to help us get what we need. But in that, there is a possible misdiagnosis of what it is that we need and what it is that we absolutely must have in order to continue and survive and thrive, and what in the bigger picture might we need to lose in order to get, what we really need. So there is this process where, you know, the TED Talk by Ryan Martin, he talks about how in his anger research, he's an anger researcher, how he like, as he hears people talk about their anger, the way we use our language around it is, "This makes me so mad," or, like, "They made me so mad when they did this," like, where the external circumstance that happened made us feel a certain way, and that our common belief about ourselves, a lot of us, is that, you know, like, I was provoked. Like, I wouldn't have done that if they didn't provoke me, and so this provocation, this idea of the external circumstance making us angry, and the way he lays it out, there's, like, the mechanism of anger and what it's doing and where some people are, overly angry. They're excessively angry, got some can't really switch out of that gear kinda thing going on with their energy, like, this helps to see why that probably is, and why some people are repressing or suppressing their anger. It's, like, all baked into this, so the provocation is absolutely part of it, the trigger of, like, what happened to bring something to the surface, but he says, like, the trigger is not what actually creates the anger. The provocation is not what creates the anger, because if it was, we would all get mad about the same things. And to some degree, we do. Loss of control, physical injury. There are certain things that will trigger anger in most people where we feel like our needs are being threatened or security is being threatened. We will have a tendency to get angry as a person. But there's also lots of like personal things that make us angry. And that's where like anger is very personal as far as what is going to trip that trigger for each of us. And so that is because there's the provocation, and like kind of around the provocation, there's what he called the pre-anger state. And the pre-anger state is, did you get enough sleep last night? Did you, you know, eat some breakfast? Are you hungry? Like, do you feel full? Do you feel fed? Do you feel like Are you appreciated at home and at work? Like, do you feel good in your relationships, good in your day-to-day? Like, if there's a disruption in your overall self, like if there's some kind of agitation already present, and then the person in the cubicle next to you is chewing too loudly on their lunch that they're eating at their desk, that can trip your trigger and make you angry when if you had had enough sleep and you were well fed and well rested, quite possibly their loud chewing wouldn't have quite the same effect. So the experience hasn't changed, but we did. Like our perspective, our experience in the moment was able to be changed because our pre-anger state was in a more stable place. So when there's already a disruption in our energy, basically it's going to be that much easier to get provoked for somebody else to provoke you. The example that he gave was like, imagine you leave your house, you're driving in your car, it's like a weekend day and it's just beautiful and, perfect fall day, and you drive around because you want to go look at the fall leaves, and you're doing that, and somebody kind of merges in front of you and they're going significantly lower than the speed limit and going so slowly, and you interpret it like, huh, well, this is actually nice because now I can go slower and really even just take in these fall leaves. And it's so nice. And, maybe them slowing you down, maybe even a blessing. Like that's what it looks like. And then switch it to the pre-anger state of, it isn't a weekend day, it's a weekday, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, you have a job interview at 8:15, you're running late because your kid wouldn't put on their shoes, and now you only have 15 minutes to get somewhere it normally takes you 20 minutes to get to, and now somebody merges in front of you and they're going significantly lower than the speed limit. This person is now obstructing you from where you're trying to go. The person driving slow in front of you is the same. It's your pre-anger state and like what energy are you bringing to it? So if you're already in a hurry, if you're already feeling late or tired or at the end of your rope, and then here's one more thing, it's like that's where, especially repressed anger or suppressed anger, um, they're like, we can demonize the shouty ones, the ones that are, like, so quick to act out their temper or so quick to, like, make a declaration of complaint. I know my dad is somebody that comes to mind where I'm like, if he could just, like, tone it down a little bit, like, I think we'd all be in a nicer spot, but, like, he wouldn't. And if he was holding that in, that disruption to his energy would disrupt all of the energy around him. And in the end, anger doesn't stay in. Like anger eventually will come out and it'll add up and 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 add up. And then the people who aren't willing to shout end up screaming. And I definitely resonate with that. I've had some major freaking meltdowns where I was bottling. I was like the king of bottling my shit. And then eventually something that bears some small resemblance to like all of this history of things piling up, like that's what eventually trips the trigger. And now I'm expressing my anger. And that's actually something with anger too, is like we tend to express our anger more easily the less significant the relationship we have with the person that we feel like we need to be angry with. So that driving example where the slow person in front of you is some stranger, faceless, nameless, personless stranger who is only the monster holding you up from your job interview, and very, very easy to completely project in that situation and be so mad at them. And that's where I think a lot of like really our most common expression of anger is road rage. A lot of us, and we get mad when we drive, but like in our life, we're not mad. We're not mad people. It's just those other drivers. And it's like, no, that's just the lowest bar to entry. That's the lowest barrier to entry, is to be mad at a stranger. That's also, I think, where we saw a lot of really traumatic outbursts to service workers during the pandemic where people were bottling a lot of stress, and then to some faceless person behind the counter, they let them have it. And it's like, that person didn't do anything. That person is doing their job. They didn't do the pandemic. They just told you that, like, you can only get 2 gallons of milk, not 6. You don't have to be mad at that person. You can be mad about the situation. It's totally healthy to do that. But the recipient of expressing your anger can definitely turn what I would call inappropriate. At the same time, though, that person, that service worker manifested that. They found themselves in the right place at the right time to have that experience. And I think there also comes back to this like suppressing our anger side, especially those of us that are really good in the service industry. We're very good at feeling conflict with a customer or whatever and putting a smile on our face and dealing with the situation. This is my customer. I can set aside my own personal feelings for the moment. The my best example of this are people who can't help but talk politics. Like, they just can't help themselves, and so, like, in the times when I was, like, cashiering at the grocery store where I'm just, like, standing at the cash register for, like, 6 or 8 hours a day and just kinda one person at a time, like, ringing up groceries, and there would be lots of people who would express opinions and state things and kind of just, like, assume that we must see eye to eye, we must have the same opinion about this. Meanwhile, in my mind, it's one of those things of like, I feel like I'm witnessing injustice. I feel like this person's perspective is destructive and harmful. And yet at the same time, like, it's really not about expressing my anger. It's really about suppressing it. But at the same time, I think the pandemic like really turned up the volume, turned up the tension that we were experiencing individually, like in our systems. And then one little slight, like a 2-gallon limit on milk, feels like the end of the freaking world. And it's not because of the 2-gallon limit, it's because of all of the injustices that have been sitting there that haven't been addressed, haven't been dealt with. We're living with so many different injustices that then there can be that breaking point, that snapping moment where somebody I'm on live stream. Don't bother her, Mungie. Don't bother her, Mungie. Yeah. Um, Mungo. Um, yeah, definitely turned up the volume. So there's okay, so back to the model of like how does anger actually unfold? We have the provocation, so what tripped the trigger. We have the pre-anger state, and then so we still haven't gotten to anger yet. Then we have the appraisal. And this is where I say it's so interesting to say that you've witnessed injustice because there is, like, within that conclusion of calling something unjust, pointing your finger at a specific thing and saying, there is not justice here, that is really, really interesting and really, really telling. Same as Aries energy, what you get mad about, what you label as injustice is very telling about who you are on a soul level. And that is because of this appraisal piece. The primary appraisal and the secondary appraisal. So, the part that we do first is when something happens to us, the first thing we decide was this a good thing that happened to us, or was this a bad thing that happened to us? And so that's where we have the state of, somebody pulling in front of us and driving really slowly. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Because the person who's out for a drive and wants to enjoy the day and the sun and whatever, like, they're probably not feeling any kind of negative effect from this neutral action of somebody driving too slow in front of you. Whereas if you're on your way to the job interview, this person is now not just slow, they're monstrous. How dare they drive so slowly? How dare they keep me from where I need to be? Like, there can be this deeming of something as harmful and destructive and possibly even mean-spirited and, like, intentionally blocking what you want. And so that's where I think it's super interesting, as far as, like, this appraisal piece and where people with, like, chronic anger, like, where they are angry more than they're not, that is because there can be so many different things within this appraisal step, either the primary appraisal or the secondary appraisal. Primary being, was it good or bad? And the secondary appraisal is how good or how bad is this? Like, again, we're figuring out most of the time in a split second how we feel and how to respond. And anger is a very fast one. Usually, it can be very natural to respond in a very authentic way when we get mad. But in that appraisal step, there are such things as like catastrophizing. So, like a propensity to see things as worst case scenario. That's like a personal habit of thought? Do you more quickly go to like all the negative things, which is definitely more normal for human beings? Our brains are kind of wired to pick up on the negative stimuli so that we can protect ourselves or heal ourselves or feed ourselves or whatever we need to do, as opposed to the positive stimuli just kind of get lost in the background while we're so busy trying to survive. And so if we can practice seeing the good in any situation, like kind of I'm reaching for like what would be the opposite of catastrophizing? Like where catastrophizing is like that tendency to see worst case scenario first and foremost, and the opposite being like giving the benefit of the doubt and trying to find the good, like maybe even in what looks like not a good situation. Like there's probably some parts that are good and some parts that aren't so great. And our tendency to focus on which of those is part of this appraisal step, as far as like, especially that primary appraisal, where if we have a tendency to see worst case scenario, every little thing anybody ever does to us is going to piss us off because there are slights around every corner. There are like people doing their best to keep all their things together, and what can end up happening looks ends up looking thoughtless in our direction. And that's another one where another way that we can kind of like get wonky in our appraisal is misattributing causation, meaning like, okay, so let's go back to the car in front of you example, and let's say you're on the way to the job interview, pre-anger state, and your primary appraisal is uncalled for, this is unacceptable, I have to pass. And as you pass, let's say the person is bent over in pain, they look like they are, not with it, they are clearly struggling to keep themselves even upright, and that is why they're going so slowly, because they are having a really hard minute, like who knows what's going on with them. But at that point, like, it would be very likely that instead of being so angry with them for slowing you down, it would be very likely at that point with that new information that you would then feel more compassion towards them, like, "Oh, shit, like, maybe I should call 911. Maybe I should, like, help them," rather than just being like, "What a monster for slowing me down." Like, misattributing causation. Like, there can be, kind of going back to that catastrophizing kind of like tendency, there can be a tendency to think that people mean you harm. And then kind of no matter what people do, you take it as them doing you harm. And so really, what is the cause of them behaving like this? Like another one that comes to mind is out of Martha Beck's book, The Way of Integrity, where she was talking about like a woman who in their session, what she was working through was feeling so angry and betrayed by her friend who had just had a baby, and her friend like fell off the face of the planet and just completely abandoned her, and like she must not love her and she just is a horrible person and probably didn't ever even love her. And then Martha's like basically explained like what it's like to have a new baby, to be so exhausted, to be so tuned in to like this other being that you even kind of forget about yourself and like this is what it's like, she is most likely not abandoning you. She is most likely fully consumed in something else. It's not personal. But if we believe that it is, we can definitely feel slighted. And then by misdiagnosing their behavior, their treatment of us, we jump to an angry response and we treat them as if they have done us harm. And in that treatment, there's like an attack that they really didn't provoke. They were being authentic. They were being honest. The new mom was focusing on her baby as she should be. And there is yeah, that's like gotta be such a big one. I see that so much in myself that like that pre-anger state of already feeling lonely or misunderstood, and then somebody makes one little comment and it just like provides an outlet for all of that to be expressed. Um, Another one that we can kind of miscalculate in our appraisal is overgeneralizing. And that's when we say things like always or never. And that again, we can see somebody do a behavior that in the past we experienced somebody do the same behavior and we had a certain experience. And then as soon as we see the first signs of that, we immediately like superimpose that this must be what's going to happen again because they did the first thing. Obviously, they would have done all the way through to the 10th step. And we take the little fragments of experiences that we have or have had, and we put them onto situations where they don't belong. And that overgeneralizing is kind of, again, like going back to our mindset and like our pre-anger state as far as are you someone who is more likely to try to see into the present situation, or as soon as something happens, is it like it zooms out and it's like the whole world's against me, and it's like all of these like overgeneralizations that's like one person said they didn't want to go on a date with you, the whole world isn't against you. Like that one person made a choice, it doesn't represent the whole rest of the world. And yet sometimes those links can be made in our brains. Another one that can happen is demandingness. And this is where, like, basically, we are in such a state of our needs not being met that we can basically, like, become completely unempathetic towards what the other person has going on. And that would be like if you're in the, in the back in the example where somebody pulls in front of you, they're driving really slowly, you're on your way to the job interview, you come past them, and now instead of looking at them and seeing like what are they doing, you're already yelling about like get off the fucking road, you dumbass, like get back, learn how to drive, like blah. Like you're already doing that, and you like in your self-righteousness like don't even see that this person is like having a health emergency in this moment. Like again, it's not personal, and yet in the unmet needs that are so urgent of yours, like you need this job so badly that someone getting in the way of that, no matter what the reason, we only can see our own need and we can't recognize that this other person has needs too. And theirs may be a life or death situation where getting a job or a job interview, like it is not as urgently, immediately a life or death situation. It's just not. The greater need in that situation is this person having the health emergency in front of you. So, like, when we say we've witnessed injustice, all of this has happened, right? Like, all of our appraisal has happened in order for us to say that this was bad or harmful or wrong or unjust. Um, and that's where maybe it was and maybe it wasn't. And I don't ever want to take anybody's anger away from them. Anger, to quote my life coach, anger is yummy. Anger is one of the most delicious emotions we have. One of the best physical sensations you can feel is mad, because in that moment, you like urgently know who you are. You urgently know what do you need and what do you need that hasn't been met yet. Like it's all crystal clear in the anger when we let it be, right? Like a lot of us have training around keeping that physical sensation inside. And that's honestly where I've seen a lot of ties between anger and depression, and where, like, in that, like, trained modesty of being nice and being, like, happy, and we get trained into that to where we don't feel like we deserve to rock the boat or, like, bring a conflict to the surface. Um, like, basically, when we aren't willing to express our anger, it ends up getting redirected in towards ourselves and aimed at ourselves, and that anger directed towards the self is what leads to depression, is one school of thought. So, like, the depression experience of feeling lifeless, feeling lethargic, feeling confused and lost in a cloud of, like, not knowing who you are or what you want or what to do next, like, that depressed, low energy, lifeless feeling, that is basically the anger being pointed inward instead of outward. And that one simple block in our energy, like, are you allowed to get mad or not? That will determine, like, are you activating things out into the world, like investing your energy into what you feel is just and the way that you want to show up and set your example? Or are you keeping it in and telling yourself you don't deserve to be mad about this? Like, this probably isn't that big a deal. I'm probably overreacting. Like, those kinds of thoughts are such a disservice to ourselves. That's the anger being pointed inward towards you must not know what you're doing. Otherwise, you wouldn't be mad at this. And that's not fair. That's not fair because anger is so natural. We can't help it. And that expressing our anger, like, as I was thinking about it, I realized, like, expressing our anger is a lot based on believing that others would be served by taking your perspective on board. Expressing your anger, saying out loud, or, like, even just making a choice to head in a different direction. Like, you're making a statement that, others would be well suited to listen to what I have to say, that, like, I have a sense that, like, there's a greater level of justice somewhere outside of this situation. And feeling like you have the right to express that, that's something where, like, one of them, I think it was that learning to be angry video on the prep playlist, that, like, healthy parenting looks like helping your kids know how to get mad and then do something about it, how to mount a productive complaint. Like, hopefully not teaching them to just scream at the first service person that walks in front of you, but, like, what do you do with that when you are angry about the injustice of a particular thing? What do you do about it? And that's where, again, like, they're watching your example of how you deal with your own anger. And that's where, the way we were trained, I do practice, like, an underlying sense of the people who trained us, they did it that way because that's how they were trained, and the people who trained them did it that way because that's how they were trained, and, like, there was a long lineage of ancestors who have perpetuated these patterns. And so now I feel like I'm turning into, like, more and more, like, kind of 1 degree turn, letting myself express my authentic sense of what's just and what's not. And so much of doing that, I think, in a productive way is really taking our time with sitting with our appraisal. So just because you feel mad doesn't mean you need to express it, doesn't mean you need to make a change in the world. Maybe what is off is thinking that you need something that, this situation where your need is being unmet. Maybe the anger is so you can, like, take action and close the gap, or maybe the anger is coming so that you can let go of needing the thing that you think you need. Like there can be multiple ways to navigate and close the gap that gets ripped open inside of us when we get mad. So there's like a self-love component to letting your anger be heard and witnessed, if only ever even inside of yourself. To take the time, like inner parent to inner child, to let the inner child express its sense of being wronged. Like there's something in that. There's something, either something that needs said, a perspective that needs shifted, a need that needs to be reoriented, or maybe there's like a fill your own cup kind of opportunity that, like, maybe you don't even need that other person to meet this need for you. Maybe there's a way you could be meeting the need for yourself and kind of take out the middleman. Like there can be so many delicious outcomes of experiencing our anger. And actually, like going back to my life coach, Melissa, when I very first started working with her in August of 2020, one of the very first, like we had our very first session, and then in the 2 weeks before the second session was when I walked into Cecil K's one morning, my grocery store, and like within the first 15, 20 minutes, like every little thing was just pissing me off. I was so, oh God, I'm about to explode. I'm about to call this person and give them a piece of my mind. I'm about to call this person and give them a piece of my mind. I just, how could they do this? How could they let it get like this? Like, oh my God. And I was just like beside myself, like angry at multiple everybody really, like if I'm being perfectly honest. And instead of taking any action, I pulled back for a second and took a deep breath and remembered that I'm paying good money for a life coach and that maybe this is a great moment for me to employ my life coach and give her this life situation and get an outsider's bird's eye view on what is this? Why is this here? Why is this happening? Before I really like take action or decide which way to go from here, I just know that the energy, this anger, this like ripping me apart on the inside, such that I want to rip people apart on the outside, very like Hulkish. Um, all I know is that I'm about to do something, and I would really like it to be loving and productive and good for me and good for them, and I wanna channel this. I knew that. I wanna channel this, and maybe she can help me. I just know I'm gonna do something with it, so let's figure out what that might look like. And as I explained to her, and she was just right there, divine timing, like ready to support me and was so helpful. And she came back with that very first message, that very first like life coaching moment was, anger is so yummy. And instantly I was disarmed. I was like instantly open to, "Wait, what?" Because this feels like a fucking, like, grenade going off inside my, like, the core of my body. It's shattering me. I can't stand it. I have to do something, and now here she is telling me that this is yummy? What? What? And I was like, what is she gonna say? And as she continued, I see what she means, because there is such a claiming of your own sovereignty. In that anger, there is a, I don't have to put up with this. I could I could make a change. I don't have to be here. I don't want to be here. Like I, in that anger that I felt about Cecil K's, underneath it, the pre-anger state was this sense of, like, the plan the whole time was that I would build the store and I would run the store. I would like be the store manager while I finished building it. And so once it was built and now it's just like maintaining it on a weekly basis, that is the job of the next person, not me. And so we went into it, all of us, eyes wide open, that that's what we're doing. And my pre-anger state that day was that about a year before, I made it known that I was done. Like, it's built. Like, okay, so let's get the manager thing going, and okay, okay, okay. And for like a year, nothing happened. Nothing happened. And I just kept waiting for somebody to say like, "All right, so let's, what do I do? How do I do this? All right, so I'll take this and you'll do." Like I kept waiting for somebody to be like, "All right, I'm ready to transition." And that day, in August of 2020, when I walked in there and every little thing fucking pissed me off and I got mad, as I processed it with Melissa and I found my sovereignty within that anger, I found, "What is it that you want? Why are you mad?" I'm mad that I'm even fucking here, let alone this bullshit and this bullshit and this bullshit and this bullshit. I can't, no, no, this is not my job anymore. And somebody else needs to be doing this job. And as I realized that this anger was really this like alert of my own readiness, I felt liberated in vocalizing that, like, I am officially done. We are officially starting the transition. We will start on this day. Here are some documents to help us prepare to get our minds wrapped around what all needs to be transitioned. Here's a plan of like, we'll transition this piece on week one. And then on week two, we'll transition this piece. And on week three, and I had a 13-week plan that I sent to them. And I said, we're starting this next week. I'm done. This is enough. And best thing that ever happened to me, and I had to get mad. I had to get mad because I wasn't willing to rock the boat until I was too mad to stay in that situation. I couldn't take it anymore. And in my anger, I took that like added energy to liberate myself, and in so doing, like, released a lot of built up tension from inside my system where I was tolerating things that were less than what I wanted, that were less than what I knew was what needed to happen. I didn't want to do this anymore. I have other things that I want to be giving this energy to. And while I stay here somewhere where I feel like my energy isn't really needed, I'm not doing all of this that's important to me. And that came to a head that day in getting really mad. And there's absolutely something to say about letting anger be the yummy indicator of our own sovereignty, of our own willingness to fight for what we believe is right, to mount a complaint if and when that's necessary, and at a minimum, to withdraw our energy from what no longer serves us in that moment, regardless of the reason, and to redirect it towards something that does. We owe that to ourselves. And our anger doesn't let us live outside of those parameters for very long. We can repress anger for a little while, but it wreaks havoc inside of our system and eventually it's going to come out anyway. So recognizing like the bodily sensation of anger, where like even just like our cheeks flushing, that is part of the rush of like the hormones that anger sends through our body. Where like I remember one of the biggest angry moments I've ever felt. I didn't say anything in the moment, but inside my body, it was like fire crawling on my skin, all over my arms, my chest, my entire face got so red. And I remember like feeling my ears, like I had to check to see, like, are they on fire? Are there like actual flames? Because they were so hot, they were like throbbing, it hurt. And like that's the bodily experience of anger. And that sensation inside your body, I wouldn't wish it on anybody who's not able and ready to use it to liberate yourself from whatever it is that's pissing you off, because clearly it's in opposition to who you really are, like on that Aries kind of core internal level. So, to summarize that system of anger, before we ever get to anger, the very first step is the pre anger state. And then we have the provocation. And then we have the appraisal process, meaning the primary appraisal, was it good or bad? And the secondary appraisal of how good or how bad. And then maybe we get over here to anger. So, when we feel anger, that gives us at least some places to go as far as what's happening here? What is your appraisal of the situation compared to your appraisal of what you should be living, you should be having, you should be receiving? Like, Anger is a gap, a really violently big gap between what you are currently living and what you believe you deserve. And maybe you've never even, like in my case with the store manager thing, I thought I had articulated myself like a year before that, but I hadn't. I was very vague and I was very going with other people's flow and making sure that they were comfortable first and foremost and that that was my priority. I didn't want to give them too much too fast, and that mindset of trying to keep them comfortable, it eventually led to a bit of a volcano moment where I was no longer willing to prioritize their comfort over mine. I needed my comfort to be my priority. And so I had to make that step and I had to like take the ball myself and initiate that change and take us forward through that change whether they are comfortable or not. I will do my best to help support their comfort as we go through this change that I need. So there's like a prioritization that happens so fast inside the appraisal that tells us whether or not we are angry and whether or not we're going to get angry. So many pieces that like flow out in all directions when we really start looking at like what are emotions, what do they mean, what do they represent, how do they work. um I personally, I that this was part of my Ananda reading earlier this week where she was telling me how based on some similarities that she and I have and how she understands her energy, and she was like kind of giving me some insights or whatever on my energy. Um and she basically said like you're running energy through your body so naturally, you probably don't even realize fully what you're doing. And that really like dislodged something for me as far as like I think a lot of times like I tend to not include my experience, like my physical experience of emotions because like as this whole live stream on anger represents, like there are so many facets. And honestly, like I just like kind of forget that not everybody is like as tuned in to the way their body feels as like maybe I do resonate with that as far as like it coming so naturally that you almost don't even see it. Like, as far as before the mirror was invented and your face, like the concept of your face, like you didn't know what your face looked like. Like you had no picture of it, but it was on there and you could use it and it was so natural. You don't have to know what it looks like to be able to like use it well. And I think, yeah, like there's a big part of the energy that moves in my body that's a lot like that, where the physical sensation of emotions, I'm going to do my best to start like incorporating where where do I feel and what do I feel? Like what is the sensation that motivates, all of the plethora of emotions that we as humans can experience. There's so much to it, and anger. I like this piece of it too from Matt Kahn as far as like part of anger is that you have to be breathing really fast to be and stay angry. So if you can like regulate your breathing, that like this is why meditation helps with emotional regulation in general, is because if you can regulate your breathing or you can focus intentionally on taking deep steady breaths, your emotions will respond to that. And so, again, I think it's like just so fascinating to be able to see on multiple levels like, what are these messages? What, like, as far as what I have conceptualized in my mind, like, it kind of reminds me of Battlestar Galactica and what are they even called? The bad guys, but, like, these ships where at one point, see, and I don't remember her name either, but one of them like, gets up in this ship and is, like, driving the vehicle, but the ship is like a body, and it really, really resonates as far as, like, how it feels to be in a human body and, like, feel the physical sensations, like the bottom dropping out of your stomach or your whole skin getting hot, or like to be able to connect to those physical sensations as far as why are they here and what is the message and how like this energy is present and how am I meant to navigate or move forward out of this space, um, or to act differently possibly because this energy came and is now unlocked inside of me. So, yeah, I think it's really fun to deep dive into these particular emotional experiences and to understand ourselves hopefully that much better in the process of how natural each and every one of these emotions really are, as far as like the physical experience of them being undeniable. When there's energy present, when you're feeling a certain way, like your body will let you know. Your body will not let you forget about how you feel about certain things. And when we don't address it, it backs up in our system and it causes all kinds of difficult complications with our energy not flowing the way that it's really intended to, all the way to the deepest, darkest depression. And I really, really, kind of want to leave it there as far as like having spent a decade and a half in chronic depression and then figuring out that there's like an inverted anger kind of issue that leads to that kind of lifelessness. I can see the parallels of all the eggshells I walked on, all the people that I kept comfortable instead of acknowledging like what I really want. And I can see how I stuffed myself in a drawer and just like locked it shut. And I was here in a capacity to sacrifice myself for the well being of others. And yeah, I can see why someone living that life would be depressed because I mean, that path was not what I came here to walk. Like, in the end, my anger eventually got me so fired up that I took an action to let myself out of the drawer and let myself walk the path that felt right to me. And again, I think that's all we can ever do is let ourselves have what we want. Let ourselves go where our emotional messages are the most favorable. And anger is a pretty good indicator that what you're witnessing is not what you believe. It's not what you think is right or just in the world. And again, at that point, I would ask in that kind of sitting with the appraisal process, like, is this your fight? Is this your injustice to solve? Or is it simply an invitation to take your energy and go somewhere else? Like we can use our anger for either one. And really, it just all is pointing back to who we are, what we want, what we need most of all, and what we need as far as the building blocks of the mission our soul came here for. Like, I had to liberate myself from that place because I needed to start my spiritual business. I needed to start my consulting business. Like, I had other things to do. So, staying stuck where you don't belong, eventually your anger will set you free. And that is a really, really beautiful gift that we possess that. I thank you so much for tuning in and choosing to swim down the well of anger and what it is. And I would love to hear from you in the comments as far as the reflection of like what makes you angry and how do you understand the injustice that you're witnessing, and kind of ipso facto, like playing that out into what your definition of justice is. If the thing makes you angry, then clearly there's something else that you're reaching for. And that's really the yummy part that Melissa was talking about was, you know, yes, the troublemaker makes you angry, but at the same time, like they're lighting up what you really want. And now you know it more clearly than you did before, thanks to the troublemaker. Like I'm glad that in my example, nobody did it for me. Nobody like just was like, "Okay, Carly, we'll just, all feather your nest so that you can have exactly what you want." They all did what was best for them. They kept themselves comfortable, and who can blame them? I kept myself comfortable by keeping them comfortable until it wasn't comfortable anymore. And when it was too much, I eventually said something. And I'm grateful for the anger that surged within me that day that led me to change my life. I am very grateful, and I would be very grateful to hear from you. I would be very grateful if you would put a like on the video if you like it, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This coming Saturday, since it's time, we have the second part of the book club coming up tomorrow, Saturday, November 5th. If you would like to join us, I do believe Maddie has put the link. Oh, not yet, but I'll bet she will put the link for the book club in the chat in the description box. If you did not come to part one, that is no problem. You are still welcome to join us. Um, there we go. The Way of Integrity Book Club. You can RSVP through the meetup event, and that is where you can get the Zoom link when it's time. It's at 11 a.m. Central Time on Saturday, November 5th, which is tomorrow if you are here with us live. So, thank you so much again, dear friends. Thank you for choosing to spend this time with me. It is sincerely my honor that you would do that. I know there's lots of places in this world where you can choose to focus your time and energy, and I'm grateful that you chose here this time. So, thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day, your week, your life, and I'll see you soon. Okay. Okay. Bye. Thank you.